Welcome, guys. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. I'm David Lappin. I am joined, as usual, for the, 44th time by my fellow Unibet ambassador and now a poker star in Finland, Dara O'Kearney. Dara, how was your Christmas and New Year?
Christmas and New Year was very good. I'm glad we stopped numbering these episodes. Lock-In 44 doesn't have quite the same appeal as whatever we're going to end up calling it. Yeah, it's been good. I did get accused of looking like a NASCAR driver in that Finnish documentary that you referred to. I would like to point out there's actually a couple of more patches that could have gone on, but so I'm actually showing restraint in this area.
How many sponsors can one man have?
Yeah, well, you could probably have more than me because, more shirt space.
Oh, whoa. Okay, we're going to cut off this line of questioning immediately now. Look, I had Omicron over Christmas, so we did a literal lock-in for, I think, about 14 days. Not much fun in the Lappin Harford household here. The worst part was I lost my taste. Some people would say I never had any in the first place. I also lost my smell, but fortunately they did come back. This is our first lock-in of 2022, which obviously feels sort of like the third year of 2020. I imagine some people can relate to that. There are some stricter restrictions coming in, but there is also some reason for optimism. We're all clinging on to that optimism right now. It does seem like this Omicron wave of the COVID virus, while obviously very infectious, is milder and is going to be a lot shorter. So fingers crossed, we might be able to play some live poker come, I don't know, maybe late February, some semi-normality by mid-February. Let's hope. With that in mind, I'm definitely hoping to play live poker in the spring when it comes back. How about you, Dara?
Yeah, I was hoping to play golf for the end of January, but unfortunately that was one of the casualties. Maybe a little prematurely because all of the noise is coming out from the government here now are that Omicron isn't causing the same degree of deaths and hospitalizations and all the other problems. We also have the most boosted population in Europe right now. So in terms of protection, Ireland is definitely one of the more protected places. A lot of people are asking about the Irish Open. Obviously, that's on a lot of people's minds, but that's not due until April. So I think we have very strong grounds for optimism that things will be back to relative normality by then.
Yeah, I agree with you. It does feel like any early information we're getting means that this wave could be sort of sharp and short, and maybe we will be able to do some fun stuff in the spring. EPT Prague is in March, I believe, maybe like the 7th to 16th of March, something around that. That seems like maybe a good opportunity for people to get back together again on the live poker circuit in Europe. Speaking with the powers that be in Unibet, we have no confirmation as of yet about the return of Unibet Opens live, but it is hoped that the autumn might be the time for those. In the meantime, I know we're open to some partnerships, so previous partners, fingers crossed, we can maybe, do some business with them and have some Unibet branded live events in the summer and maybe even in the spring as well. Fingers crossed for those. Speaking of live poker, we do have a guest this week, and don't think we've just left him hanging just on the third screen for the last little while. He isn't going to join us until a little bit later on. He's a very busy man, especially around this time of year. He is GPI President Eric Danis, and we will be asking him all about the GPI rankings for 2021, maybe the GPI rankings for 2022 and how maybe they'll be different. I don't know if they will, and the upcoming GPI Global Poker Awards. Before that, though, we have got some news stories to cover, Dara. First up, Run It Once has closed their poker site. Not their hugely successful training site, I might add, with a plan now to pivot to a new life in legal and regulated markets in the USA. Run It One CEO Phil Galfond announced the site's closure on December 30th, explaining that all games would stop on January 3rd, which they did. Players have exactly 3 months to claim their balances. Dara, this is obviously a huge disappointment. There's no question that Phil and his team are straight shooters and very player focused in the way they conduct themselves. It's also perhaps not hugely surprising either, though. The site never really gained any significant market share, and the lack of tournaments, as I suppose the ultimate poker Trojan horse, really did hobble them a little bit in terms of getting players to sign up and join the site, and then obviously jump into the side games, the cash games, when they busted those tournaments. So I'm guessing that couldn't have helped either. Your thoughts?
We don't want to be too results-based. I know from my previous incarnation as a tech consultant that there's just massive variance in terms of what works and what doesn't work. Sometimes something which seems like an absolutely brilliant idea just doesn't catch on. One thing, typically one thing derails it, one regulatory change, one market change. It's very, very hard to say. And other things which, you know, don't seem very promising catch on like wildfire. And people in the business world often tend to be very results-based. I remember the first company that I ever worked for, it was the first hugely successful Irish software company. Ionized. They were like the geniuses who broke the mold and you know, put Irish software on the map. No, they were just lucky. They happened to have a product which worked, and they hadn't really put any great thought into it, and it just caught fire. Those three guys went on to other companies over the course of their career and literally run them all into the ground. Nothing ever worked again. And, you know, they didn't just suddenly lose their genius, I don't think. It just shows that there is a large amount of variance there. So I would say bear that in mind in a world where everything had gone right for Run It Once. And now they were the GG. But yeah, it's a shame. I do think the lack of tournaments was definitely a huge own goal.
Yeah, Phil wrote quite a lengthy blog sort of giving more detail after his announcement. He said, we've poured our hearts, minds and souls into Run It Once Poker. We didn't accomplish anything that we set out. Sorry, we didn't accomplish everything that we set out to, but we're far from finished. It's great to hear him obviously so determined to still make something of the poker playing software. It is obviously a valuable piece of kit maybe to somebody else if that was an exit strategy possibility. Clearly he's thinking more about keeping the brand together for himself and maybe being able to get into the US market, which, you know, is obviously sort of going to open up in a way that it's going to be the Wild West again, and everyone's going to be trying to gobble up market share, maybe starting from a similar position of having none. Obviously some companies might have an advantage with their infrastructures and whatnot, but it does feel like there is uncharted territory there for people to go after. Doug Polk was very blunt in his criticisms of Run It Once. He took to Twitter to say, I appreciate the spin, but the reality is Run It Once took a huge L with a terrible strategy of no MTTs, we mentioned that, reg-based player pool, and entering an incredibly competitive market without any unique value. The pivot makes little sense, but the initial plan was just really poorly thought out. To push back on that slightly, it's certainly not true that they ended up with a reg-based player pool, although I see why you would think that, as I think we mentioned maybe, you know, on the chip race around the time when the site was being launched, that did seem like it could be an initial problem. In reality, it bore out that it wasn't a particularly reg-heavy site. I spoke to Phil a couple of days ago, actually, about coming on this show, which obviously we would love to have him on to talk about all of this. He told me that he would love to come on, but he thought it made more sense to do so in a couple of months' time when he would know more and also be able to perhaps talk about more. So for the moment, I guess we can put a pin in that story and move on to another poker closure. It does seem like it is the season for it at the moment. PokerShares has stopped offering odds, the brainchild of Mike McDonald. The more informal Bank of Timex morphed into the prominent sports betting platform PokerShares in 2017. PokerShares allowed players and fans to wager on various poker events and tournaments, but as of this month, they have decided to shut up shop. They tweeted, and this is from a week ago, next week will be 5 years since we launched, and unfortunately, we've decided the time is right to conclude this journey. It has been a rewarding experience to help make the poker staking market more efficient, give fans at home more skin in the game, and allow the community to have a better perspective on how the market tends to rank various players. Dara, first up, do you think they did make poker staking and the poker staking market more efficient and maybe transparent?
I mean, I think they did in the sense that it no longer required a personal relationship between the player and the person who wanted to take an interest in them. You know, if you wanted to buy a piece of a player in the World Series, first of all, that player had to be willing to sell it. And secondly, you kind of had to be able to get in contact with them and come to some sort of arrangement. So it was quite an inefficient model. Now, that said, I think when it was announced, a lot of people were like, "Oh, all those players who are gouging the market with their insanely their comeuppance and PokerShares will undercut them," and that really didn't happen. in every single case I know, PokerShares were charging more than the players were charging. Now that's understandable because they have a profit margin, etc., etc. But it was interesting to me that the people who take an enormous interest in other people's markup, who are almost never the people who actually buy. They're just people who, you know, marketplace, markup Nazis, whatever you want to call them. They just go around sniffing their nose going, 1.4 is far too high for this person. This person selling 1.8. They never went after PokerShares. You know, they would be complaining about some guy who was selling for the World Series, and then PokerShares would put them up at 1.8, and not a peep of protest. So it was quite funny. Maybe it made the market more inefficient in that it just shut those people up because they saw that this company, which was doing it as a business, were actually charging more than the players. I don't know. But yeah, it is quite funny to reflect on. Like, it's almost like one of those how it started and how it ended up things. It was.
Well, it is fair to say that we do see people, I guess, gouge the market on occasion. And usually around WSOP time, that spirals into the full-throated arguments on Twitter that Dara described. Various forums get involved as well. There is the age-old debate, I guess, about whether some high-profile players are doing something wrong by charging a very high premium, whether it's fine to do so as well. And let the market decide. That's often another perspective shared. PokerShares definitely did end up with steeper odds on occasion than maybe you could have got off the player themselves, got it from the horse's mouth. But it is also fair to say that, you know, their juicy fig aside, there were a few occasions when they did sell players for, say, like the main event. You know, players who were selling at 1.2. We noticed a few of these, Dara, I think maybe a couple of summers ago, that PokerShares were then offering it like 0.98 or something. And I suppose maybe those ones stood out as perhaps some people gouging the marks. They didn't tend to be these huge big name players, although maybe there were examples of that as well. What did you make of those occasions when maybe people who, I suppose what I'm describing is people who are maybe not super famous players who can kind of go to the open market in that sense, but more likely players who have very good networking with maybe very well-off people, and they could maybe privately gouge. And now that looked a little trickier when they were put up at not even maybe a markup, maybe a markdown.
Yeah, there were some examples of that. And I think this is something that the people who are enormously interested in other people's markups often overlook. It's generally not the people who are charging the highest markups that are actually the worst investments. Now, obviously, they may be bad investments. I'm not saying that everybody who sells at 3.5 for the main event is worth 3.5. But from my perspective, whenever I looked at a list of markups, those people, you could argue whether they were too high or not. And to be honest, it's impossible to know. There were other players further down that you would look at and you go like, I know for an absolute fact that that's a losing player. I know how they play. I know their life record is as a losing player. I know they can't beat online, etc., and they're still selling at 1.25. Now, generally, the market police didn't go after them because they looked at 1.25 and go, well, that seems quite reasonable. Let's jump up to the next one, the big name who's charging 2.0, and go after him. but I think PokerShares was good in identifying those people in particular and going, well, they're not 1.25. They should be selling it marked down 0.98, or there were some of the older school live pros who were, I think PokerShares sold at 0.90, which, again, I'm not sure whether they really thought they were 0.90. Similar to Paddy Power, Paddy will often put up ridiculous bets just to get people talking about it and people thinking about the site. So you always have to question the incentives there. But yeah, I do think, just reiterating my point, when people look at these things, first of all, it's kind of like nobody's business what people charge. If somebody can get their friends to pay 1.25 and they're actually a losing player, more power to them. You're giving the person a sweat, and it would be impossible anyway to tell in the long term what the correct rate would be. But But yeah, it's one of those areas which people get really worked up about for some reason. I don't know. It's bizarre to me. We don't see this in other areas. We don't see people going after training sites or people going after book authors and saying your book is 23 quid on Amazon too much. That's far too much. It should only be 21. But markup is an area where for some reason people get very, very interested.
They do. And I guess maybe they feel a personal connection, or I don't know, but it does, you're right. It does seem to attract us. And I guess people are maybe, you know, a bit too high and mighty about wanting sort of a level playing field or a just system there, where in reality you can't create one. All you can do is create a market, and all you can do is have that market maybe regulated by the moaners, to whatever degree them moaning creates a very small shame culture where people don't feel like they can go too far. But that's the best you can get. Moving on, Bilzerian versus Polk. I mentioned Doug briefly earlier. He's obviously putting a lot of time into his podcast lately. Fair play to him. He had on that podcast Dan Bilzerian last week. I think a lot of people surprised to see Dan go on a podcast, and maybe even more surprised to see him come out swinging in the way that he did. It was a very awkward, shall we say, beginning to that podcast where there were no airs and graces. There was barely a welcome. And actually what we had was from ball one, Bilzerian coming after Doug. Did you watch this, Dara?
No, I have to be
honest.
I only heard. You have to understand, like my consumption of poker content that isn't strategy related is zero, literally zero. I just don't watch or listen to any podcasts that don't have any strategy content. I'm, you know, what are you saying?
Bilzerian couldn't have provided, you know, some strategy nuggets along the way that you could have, you know, absorbed?
I didn't feel it was going to be that kind of podcast, to be honest. And also, like, I mean, the timing for us was like, you know, middle of the evening. It's just terrible timing. I might watch something like that on a wind down, you know, at 2 a.m. when everybody's asleep and I'm one tabling. I'm not going to watch it at the time that it went out. Yeah. So, you know, again, I can only go on directions of people. A lot of people said that Bilzerian did a lot better than expected, and their sort of opinion of him went up. But, you know, not having watched it, I can't say how convincing the man was. Yeah, there was a lot of criticism of Doug. People felt Doug came across very badly, that he sort of allowed himself to be railroaded, wasn't particularly well prepared. Doug's new in this space as well. He's kind of used to doing the scripted, you know, hand breakdowns, etc., which he's always been very good at. This is difficult where you have, you know, a live target who's actually shooting back at you, and I guess it's a learning experience for him.
Yeah, and I have to say I did see it, and while I have heard some of the more extreme criticism of Doug, I wouldn't agree with the extreme version, but I would say that he probably, on reflection, would think, oh, I wish I had some better follow-ups or better follow-up questions, or sort of maybe forced him to go into the weeds on a few of the issues where he maybe was allowed to give his version with minimal pushback. But I don't think there was no pushback. I think Doug actually handled himself quite well, particularly after maybe the initial onslaught, which maybe put him on the back foot. I have to say, and I know we've already given it some time, but I don't really want to give this story too much time, because having watched it, and I did watch it, my overwhelming feeling was that Bilzerian quite effectively used his appearance to further propagate that false mythology about himself and his claims to being a self-made man and his various gargantuan wins that he claims. To be fair to Doug, he did push back, as I said, probably mostly on the clear holes all over Bilzerian stories, where he would sort of waffly say, oh, well, I won 400K that month and that's 5 million in a year. And then he'd go, oh, well, obviously I didn't win 5 million that year because like that was just my best month and I had losing months. And Doug's like, yeah, duh. Like that's kind of the point I'm trying to make to you. And you're sort of trying to spin 400K good month on Bodog into see how I made all this money on my own. I'm great. But ultimately, I think Bilzerian did succeed in getting his BS, frankly, more airtime. And I don't think Doug went into the weeds enough on, say, his father's 2 bankruptcies in 1991 and 2001, and a judge's accusation that he hid his assets in various companies and trusts, including the trust fund for Dan himself. Also, and this isn't really Doug's fault because Bilzerian seemed utterly dense, I have to say, to what satire is. But there was far too much time at the beginning spent on the minutiae of Thomas Keeling's funny edits in comedy videos, and not nearly enough time spent critiquing Bilzerian's misogyny and various legal issues, like when he kicked model Vanessa Castano in the face, his arrest in 2014 on bomb-making charges, how the former Ignite president, Curtis Heffernan, who they did mention briefly, sued Dan for wrongful termination, claiming he was fired for criticizing Dan's misappropriation of company funds to perpetuate his lavish lifestyle. And I think that included like renting the house that he claims to own, which is some huge mansion. Anyway, got my rant out of the way, Darren. I really wanted to get that out of my system. You can tell. Without further ado, we are going to bring in Eric Danis. It's time now for the president of GPI and the Hendon Mob. He is the organizer of the upcoming GPI Global Poker Awards. He is our great friend, Eric Danis. Eric, welcome to the lock-in.
Thank you. Nice to be on. It's good to have a streak of Canadians now. Jennifer Tilley was on last time. So I like that the streak is continuing.
We love the Canucks on this show. Yeah, no,
That's
big
right.
fans, big fans. First up, Eric, I know you are insanely busy today. I believe you spent the morning finalizing and confirming all the GPI country winners. In fact, I think I got the email in my inbox just before we got you on. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the process is I was going to say fun. It's not fun. It's funny in the sense that we can prepare as much as we want, but there's always last second tournaments that come in, especially on the national level. And this morning we had a change in one of our players of the year. So, I'm not on the major ones, but on one of the national levels in Australia. So you can prepare all you want for this. And we have been preparing for weeks. It doesn't matter. It's about what this morning's rankings, put out. We could take a few days to do it, but we like that it's, really, we try to get as many tournaments as possible. On Monday and Tuesday, we were contacting TDs around the world to try to get some of their results, and we did. So we appreciate that from all the TDs worldwide that helped us make sure that this POI was an official one and one with the most results that we could capture by today.
Well, at this point, I want to create my own birther conspiracy. I couldn't help but notice I'm second on the Irish GPI list, and the guy who's in front of me is, I want to say, Bulgarian Irish. I don't know what his claims to Irishness are, but whatever they are, and they're probably legitimate, I would like to have them delegitimized so that I can somehow have this award now. Is there anything you can do for me there, Eric?
Not for 2021, but I'll be there right for you there, David, in 2022.
Okay. Let me just get this straight. So David Lappin, who got himself reclassified on Pocket Fives as Maltese so that he would be higher up the national, who lives in Malta, is literally shitting on Alex Kurev, right, who grew up in Ireland, started playing in the Fits, and has come up through the ranks. Sorry, David, no, not by it. Team Alex here.
And all
I can say is I think I'm lower on the Maltese rankings than I was on the Irish ones in my defense.
Yeah. Hey, a lot of geniuses in Malta, that. A lot of internet geniuses in Malta. So that could be a bad move there, David.
Lots of love for Alex. I don't think I even qualified with the minimum points, so I'm glad he did. He's a great lad. And actually, he's on our next show. Check out our next episode of the Chip Race. We interview him. He's fantastic.
Please congratulate him for me.
I will indeed. Eric, you made the decision in 2020. Well, I don't know if you did, but your team did, to include some online tournament results on people's Hendon Mob records. Why did you do that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it was out of need at first. We didn't have any work, and I didn't want to let anyone go. And it was that drastic at that point. We weren't having results inputted. And I just had a conversation. It's been asked of us for such a long time, especially for the major events. And it was the decision was, I guess, threefold. Yes, it was to give the staff something to do, while we waited for live poker to come back. It was also, there was a request, from the players. And it was also that our partners, a lot of them are internet sites, online sites, sorry, why not do that for them? And if that's something that's available, we had some strict restrictions. We wanted real names. We wanted to make sure that it was the right info. So some of our providers can't do that for us, but others can. So we said, why not? We had a chat with Lance Bradley, who was with Pocket Fives at the time. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't impeding on our relationship with them. And he thought, and they thought it was a good idea for us to add them. And that's what we're going to continue to do. To be honest, right now, it's a mess in the sense that we have so many to add and then so many live events to add. So, but we added a good old KevMath to help out with that. So I'm sure he'll be able to handle the extra workload.
Well, you mentioned KevMath there. A few weeks ago, you made that, I want to say, huge acquisition, adding the legend that is KevMath to your team. Congratulations. He is quite the MVP signing. What will Kevin's role be going forward?
I think the role is the role that, what everyone does. So all of us enter results, all of us enter, tournament information, so that's at the base. We'll definitely want KevMath to use his expertise. He's been heavily involved in the awards, their participation, trying to get some submissions, asking people for submissions and all of that. So, in every single meeting that I've had with Hans, that used to be just with Hans, it's been with Kevin as well. And that's a breath of fresh air to add as well. Talking about categories and such, Kevin can add to that. Funny enough, Kevin's always been involved in our awards process. He's always helped out, always, throughout the year would send us some, hey, here's an article, here's a result that was quite impressive and, out of nowhere and all of that. So Kevin will do that, definitely be an ambassador for us. But I count on him with all of his contacts. One of the things we want to improve on the Hen and Mob, we want people to come to us, not just for results, but also for schedules. And, it's something that wasn't part of the company's philosophy beforehand. That we want to focus on now. A, it helps grow our websites, of course, but B, it's also, we want people to, when they come to our website, not only find out, hey, this is my result from 2 weeks ago. Oh, by the way, when's the next tournament here? When's the next tournament, in Europe, and all of that. So Kevin's going to be, and already has been, a key for that. And to be fair, Kevin is someone that I thought of bringing in 4 or 5 years ago when he had been let go with his previous employment, and it just didn't make sense then. But now there was an opportunity. We had the most awkward of breakfasts together, where it was sort of a date scenario where he knew what I wanted, I knew what he wanted. We both wanted the same thing, but it took about an hour to get that out. The good old polite French Canadian, takes a while to blurt out. And if you ask my wife, she'll agree with that. So I'm very slow at getting the grift and make sure that everything is taken care of. But an hour later, we actually shook hands on a deal. So once we started talking about business, Kevin was all in, and I really appreciated that. Kevin is someone that not only I respect, but I care for a lot. When I came into the industry, he did a lot for me to expose me as an up and comer. And here we are now, trying to get Kevin on our team. And I know that we had a little over the top trailer or a cinematic introduction for him, but I thought that was warranted. And there's one person in poker that deserves the fanfare. It is Kevin Mathers.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I'm glad you used the word ambassador there, because it certainly fits with Kevin. I think he's always somebody, Dara, who seems to go above and beyond the call of duty, whatever that duty is. He obviously has held different roles in our industry and he's wonderful at them all, but he is the guy who will go off and find you some information or already know it to begin with. And, is sort of perpetually patient with everyone.
Right. Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. He is. Yeah. And actually, funny enough, you sent me the list of things we were going to talk about and stuff I had to think about before, so I'd have something to say. And one of them, just to spoiler it slightly, is who we think should win different awards. One of them was best industry person. Even before we started talking about Kevin, when I was thinking about this before, Kevin was the person who immediately sprang to mind, because my view on who an industry person is or what their role should be is how much value they add to players. It's a very player-centric role, and nobody adds more value to players over the course of his career than Kevin. He's always been the go-to guy on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's just, we're just so lucky to have him. I think, frankly, maybe other industries are lucky enough to have their KevMaths, but he has sort of carved out a role for himself, maybe from at the beginning from no official role, and now he sort of seems like we couldn't do without him, which is great. And thank you, I suppose, on behalf of the poker community for formalizing that in a relationship with a company such as yourselves, where he'll probably be able to maximize his influence and impact. And I think that's great for everyone going forward. to the GPI Poker Awards, because that is the thing that's coming up. It's about, I don't know, 6 weeks away now. The ceremony will be held at RIO Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. It's on Friday, February 18th, and it will be live streamed on PokerGo. Of course, that's a partnership you guys have set up. Talk a little bit about that 3-year partnership that you set up, Eric, because I imagine that's hugely important for you in planning.
It is. I mean, that was the, in first our talks with Kerry Katz and with Brent Hanks, that's something that I had brought up on our end, that, we basically have a great partnership with PokerGo. It all involves data on each side, actually. We work with them, try to get some of their quality photos, try to get all of their information for their websites, help them with the PokerGo Tour information and PokerGo Tour race. And on the other end, one of the most important parts for me was the legacy of the awards. And a few years ago, Sam Simmons and I sat down almost like a Kev Math and I, meeting where it took about an hour to get things rolling. But when I heard that he wanted the awards to be on PokerGo, that was monumental for us. The problem is it's always been, 1 year, almost like January when everything is decided, not enough time. Whereas this time around, we were able to secure a 3-year deal, which, gives us a lot more room to breathe. Funny enough, it still always goes down to the wire. So we're panicking and working our butts off, of course, throughout Christmas and throughout the start of the new year. But it was, it was important for us to have that part of our partnership with PokerGo, and we really, really appreciate them. And I always say I get to work with Maury Iskandani and people from his team, and to be able to say that you get to work with Maury is kind of a really cool thing in poker. And, one of the most honored moments of my career is always the awards night with Maury around. So can't wait to work with Maury again in a few weeks, and just happy to have him around for 3 years. And again, it just solidifies the awards. We'd love to have the awards every year, but they cost a boatload of money. You two would know this, but it costs a lot of money to put these on, and to have a partner like PokerGo taking on some of that cost responsibility is really important.
No, you're absolutely right. We know exactly what you mean, because this show is extremely expensive to make, as you can tell. And, joking aside, we obviously would be lost without the patronage of Unibet Poker. But I'm not sure how aware I would be of how expensive it is to make an award show. It does look expensive, in fairness, and people dress up. So it looks good. The final product is excellent. And speaking, I suppose, of great industry people, you mentioned Maury there. He's certainly one that fits the bill. I'm starting to get this weird impression that maybe you'd be a very bad speed dater, Eric, and maybe we need to get
terrible.
You need a little bit more time. Maybe by dessert, you're willing to reveal your true intentions.
That's right. That's right. Very much so. Again, ask my wife and she'll tell you that's exactly the case. But once I'm in, David, I am committed. I am in.
Just grab on like a barnacle. You can't
that's right.
don't
There's a point of no return.
Great stuff. Well, look, there will be a total of, I believe, 26 awards, or maybe there are more being added. I'm not sure. In 2019, we obviously were very gratified to win the award for Best Podcast of 2018. Dara has the trophy there behind him somewhere. I want to say it's probably over his left shoulder. There it is. Yeah, just about in shot. When we won, of course, Daniel Negreanu famously spread the rumor that we had rigged it, that we'd infiltrated the jury somehow, in what I can only assume was a backlash against us personally. You changed the voting system in 2020, which meant that we couldn't rig it. And not only did we not win, but you ended up cheapening the GPI brand horribly by giving Best Podcast to Jennifer Shahade and The Grid. Don't understand why you did that. Seems like you threw the baby out with the bathwater. There were no awards, obviously, in 2021, but you've changed the system again, I believe. How has it changed, and how easy will it be for us to rig it this time?
I guess a little more complicated. The voting system is actually not just similar, but the same. It's the same as last time. We just added, there's a long read form that almost like I got legal to write it, but it wasn't. It was just us to make sure that every step is taken care of, publicly, and to make sure. So we just made updates to that list, but no, same style of voting. At the time of this recording, you two gentlemen would be getting ballots tomorrow in about 24 hours for the preliminary round. So there's 2 rounds of voting for the Votable Awards. So there'll be a preliminary round vote where all the submissions that we receive from people like you, from fans, from other people in the industry, will all be on a preliminary list. We used to call it the short list, but those lists are not short anymore, especially in the podcast category. Sorry to inform you. Gladly for you, of course, the 4 GPI and THM podcasts not eligible to win. So
we've hired a lobby company now who are going to help us campaign this year. I think that's what we decided. We're just going to put all our money that we don't spend on this show into that.
That's a very smart move on your part. I like it. So once that is determined, and we use a Oscars Academy Award style formula. We love our formulas here at the GPI to determine who makes the final ballot. And then that'll start, and I'm mixing up the days, but 7 or 8 days after the preliminary round. And then you all receive your final ballots. We then announce the final 4. By that time, the winner is already known, but not to the public. And basically, Hans and I will be the only 2 to know, Hans Kleinsman, of course. And after that, we will all get together in Las Vegas. Hopefully, we can have people from around the world join us. We'll see how that works out with travel and such, but we'll all be in Las Vegas, have a couple of glasses of champagne, and have the winners presented there.
Great stuff. Well, awards recipients will include the winners in various GPI Player of the Year races. We talked about that earlier. We talked about Alex, obviously, is the tippy top of the Irish ones. There will also be the GPI Poker Player of the Year, the Female Player of the Year, and the GPI Mid-Major Player of the Year, recognizing players scoring points in events with a buy-in, I think, lower than $2,500. That is quite a nice addition, Dara. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, it's poker has been kind of skewed, I guess, live poker by the arrival of the high rollers and the super high rollers. And this is something Phil Hellmuth in particular has raged about in the past. So that when you look at money lists now, it's often quite meaningless. There are people very, very high on money lists who maybe only have one big result in a super high roller. And, the question about what percentage of those, some people are playing with 2%, 4%, etc. The buy-in level that you're talking about here, that's still sort of the heartbeat of live poker. It's where most people live. So therefore it's kind of the most level playing field. And it is nice to see that recognized for sure.
Absolutely. Well, look, there are a lot of other awards, and I know I can't ask you your opinion, Eric, but Dara and I haven't received our ballots yet. So we would be allowed to express our picks now, or at least the sort of people we think will be in the picture. That'd be okay, wouldn't it?
Sure.
Okay, let's do it, Dara. Breakout Player of the Year.
This is a hard one, but it's.
You're going to say Jack Hardcastle, aren't you?
Yeah, I am actually. I know we're explicitly not allowed to do people we work with, and that's understandable. But Jack is a close friend of mine.
You're going to give it to me. Well, did I break out this year? What's going on here?
It feels like nepotism saying Jack, but Jack has had an incredible year. He's very, very high up the ranks. He's the number 1 ranked UK player. He's absolutely crushed it on all fronts this year live. It's no surprise to anybody who knows him that this was coming, I think. So when I was actually thinking about this category, he didn't immediately pop to mind because I kind of think of Jack as having been around for a lot longer than he actually is. But yeah, I guess it has to be Jack Hardcastle.
Well, that was how I was going to push back. I was going to say, did we not personally nominate him for Breakout Player in 2019 and 2020?
Yeah. Well, one of our early guests on this show was Tom Kitt, and Tom Kitt famously used to win Best Newcomer every single year at the Irish Poker Awards, which was kind of down to the fact that people kind of forgot that he previously got it, and he just seemed to come from nowhere every year. Maybe Jack has a bit the same to him, but yeah, I think you can go through different levels. You could be the best breakout player one year because you've suddenly gone from nowhere to top 200 in the world, and that seems like a great thing. But then if you jump from there to where Jack is now, I think top 20 or so, that's also a breakout performance. So I don't think it necessarily has to be the case that just because you've won it before, you can't win it again.
Absolutely. I think his ascent has been pretty meteoric, so I think it does qualify. However, I'm going to say Vanessa Cade. I think kind of England has made a very good late charge there. She might be in the picture for the mid-stakes tour stuff. But I think Vanessa Cade's sort of rise via the big PokerStars online win, and then some genuinely big high roller sort of final tables, I think maybe 3 back-to-back or almost back-to-back final tables then in the summer were very impressive indeed. Final table performance, Dara.
I mean, I have watched so few final tables. I just feel ridiculously underqualified to even make a pronouncement on this. Jack didn't win any of the final tables that he was on that I watched, so I can't give it to Jack.
You can't vote for Jack in every category. Jesus Christ.
I will say David Doherty's performance on the UK IBT, that was extremely impressive. And in terms of how he adjusted as well to the fact that, you know, he basically admitted that he was not as good as Dominic Nietzsche, and he therefore had to play differently against Dominic as he would against other players that he felt he had a skill edge over. I think all of those things added up together made for a very, very impressive performance. But again, you know, now I'm going down the road of I'm just giving all the awards to friends of mine, which is partly because that's the only time I watch a final table. So if I'm going to try and step back and try and be objective, first of all, I would say this is very difficult because, you know, when you watch a final table, you will often you're watching because you know some of the pros and you're looking specifically to see if they can make mistakes so you can take the piss out of them for weeks afterwards and say, what on earth were you thinking in that hand? I've watched lots of performances where the pros haven't made a single mistake. And, you know, it's a bit like show jumping. It's like, so what? Like, you know, you have to jump over 20 fences. You didn't knock any of them, but like 20 other horses did the same thing. So we have to do the same. We all have to go again and make it more and more difficult until eventually only one person gets over all the fences. But we don't get to do that in poker. We just see a sort of a sample size of one. So maybe just then we have to focus on what's the biggest occasion and who did the best on that. And obviously the biggest occasion is WSOP main event final table. It was won by Corey Aldemir. Corey made no mistakes on the final table. He played perfectly from start to finish. He actually had a couple of spots where he had to sort of think outside the box against recreational players rather than just his usual, you know, well, let's GTO this up, try and imagine the PO solution in my head and do that. And I think he came through that test very, very well. He was obviously the recipient of the donation early from one of the fun players, let's call them, and then heads up the final hand. That played very differently from the way it would have against another pro, and he found the correct call. So yeah, okay, I'll give it to Corey with a very honorable mention to David Doherty.
Now, Dara, is he one of your best friends as well, Dara?
No, I don't know Corey at all. So this is what I feel.
Well, that's good. That's good.
I'm getting away from nepotism completely. I don't think I've ever even spoken to Corey, so I can't be accused of nepotism on this one.
Well, I'm going to say I have written down, because I just in case I couldn't remember the names, and the two names I have are Corey Aldemir and David Doherty. So I'm completely in agreement with you there, Dara. Best vlogger, I pick Greg Goes All In. Who do you think, Dara?
Yeah, I think this is a no-brainer. Greg Goes All In by far. He's just miles ahead. I don't like vloggers. I don't watch vloggers. He's hilarious, and he just has a wonderful tongue-in-cheek approach to the whole thing. He's brought in a massive amount of value because his stuff can also be consumed by players who are not particularly sophisticated. It's not aimed at the elite players, but also everybody can get something out of it. I think that's what I really like. He pitches it at a very good level, and he's just a hilarious guy.
Next one I have here is best streamer. We both have to do a really long pregnant pause before making our pick on this one.
Yeah, well, obviously, first of all, you know, we're not allowed to vote for people that we
thank God for that.
Work with. So therefore, unfortunately, that rules out the wonderful Univest streamers of Lyle, Emily, and I think there's a third guy, but I can't remember. There's
definitely another one. I can't remember.
There is another one, yeah, but they're all very good. Even the guy I can't remember. But yeah, I'm going to pick Kevin Martin. I think Kevin is just so smooth in terms of his presentation. I kind of feel that the key appeal of Twitch is similar to sort of radio show hosts, where people just listen every night to listen to the music that they're going to play, even though it's kind of always the same. And so they're really there for the sort of personality of the the streamer and how well they communicate. I think Kevin communicates amazingly well with everybody. I also think the arc of his story has been wonderful. He was a guy that we didn't really take too seriously at the start. We thought he was just a reality show pretty boy trying his hand at poker. He's risen right through the ranks to the point where he's a legit crusher now. But he's still, he still walks among the people, as it were. He's still very, very relatable.
That's because he's Canadian, of course.
Another Canadian pick. Now he's a reality star pretty boy who also can do quite well in high rollers. Right. Fair play to him. Best broadcaster, Dara O'Kearney. What is your pick?
Yeah, I had a long think about this one because I was thinking my natural bias is towards people who do strategy, but I want to get away from that because I guess best broadcaster is somebody who can relate to the general poker fan. And it's hard to look beyond the WSOP team of Jamie, Norman and Lon, and they did a wonderful job again this year, and they worked together. So maybe lump the three of them together. But if I had to pick out one of those three, I'm going to pick Lon because I think Lon doesn't get enough love. The other two, their roles are very, very obvious and they do them very well. But Lon's kind of the glue in the middle. It's a bit like when somebody was talking once about what a great dancer Fred Astaire was. Somebody pointed out, yeah, but Ginger Rogers had to do everything he was doing backwards, moving backwards, which is even more difficult. Lon is the guy in the middle who kind of has to set them up for their jokes and respond to them and basically be the audience member. And I think he does that job incredibly well, better than anybody else. So yeah, Lon McCarron for me.
Well, I have a note actually here of it says, David, you better pick me because I rigged it for you last time round. I was playing the long game, so you would choose me for this category in 2022 from Jamie Kerstetter. So I guess that's my pick. I guess I have to go with Jamie. Best industry person, Dara O'Kearney, who's your pick?
Yeah, again, this is one I struggle with, as I said, because I don't even know what an industry person is and how we would judge them. There are people who are obviously a very big deal within the industry, but for me, it kind of comes down to, as I said earlier, when we were talking about Kev Math, who provides the most value to players. And that's always been Kev Math for me. Ever since Kev Math has come on the scene, he's the guy that when I think of somebody who just provides a huge amount of value to players, is willing to help them out. And also just generally promotes other people. Eric said he promoted him when he was coming up on the way up. It was the same for us. Like Kev was a huge help to us in the early days of the chip race, getting the word out that we weren't just a parochial Irish podcast. For me, it's going to be Kev.
Yeah, great selection in Kev. No one would be sad to hear his name. Also, I think, in the mix there, maybe Tom Wheaton is a good shout, but probably my selection actually will be Jenny Just. I think Jenny Just has very much behind the scenes created a platform in Poker Power where a huge number of women are being able to flex in a big way and sort of push the issues that women have in poker and the visibility of women in poker, maybe better than we've ever seen anyone be able to achieve that. And I think she's the person sort of pulling the strings, maybe, behind the scenes there. And I think her contributions, while invisible to many, are huge and noteworthy. Best event. Well, I only went to 2 events last year, Dara, so it's got to be either the IPO in Dublin or the WSOP. Might have to give it to the WSOP on scale. Sorry, Unibet, but also I'm not allowed to pick you because of the conflict of rules.
Yeah, I enjoyed both events that I went to. I wasn't sure whether this had to be best live event, given there were so few live events. I think in terms of
I didn't think of that.
An overall industry event. I mean, was it even this year though? This is the problem. I'm having problems with years. Was DNEG's Poke this year or was that last year?
Both.
Ended this year.
Both. I think it ended in this year. I think in terms of just getting eyes on poker, et cetera, in a very difficult time for poker, that was undoubtedly the biggest event. For the live event, I mean, it was great to see the WSOP back. It was a kind of a bittersweet affair with it being the last one at the RIO, and it was a little bit strange with all the masks and vaccinations and people who couldn't play, et cetera, et cetera. But it was kind of great to be reminded that that live poker will come back after the pandemic. And the same was true actually of the IPO. I would say the biggest feeling of of the players who played the IPO was sort of a mixture of joy and relief that they were finally getting to play live poker again, and that was an amazing event as well.
Can the GPI Awards be best event? Can they win their own award? Is that possible, Eric?
No.
But there's a trophy for best trophy.
That's right. And we're not eligible to win that one.
There's a trophy for best trophy. There's
a trophy for best trophy, which will by definition have to be an inferior trophy.
That's right. That's correct. That award, by the way, will be the final list will be determined by the panel, by you guys, by you two especially.
Really?
Wow. Hundreds of other people too. We're sending ballots to over 350 people, but you two will decide. However, the final vote will be a fan vote. So the fans will have 3 categories to vote in this year. So the fans will determine best trophy, which we thought was a fun category to have the fans vote on. And we actually can't wait to have the fans vote on best hand, best trophy, and poker personality of the year, as has been tradition, that last one. But we thought that, having a list of 40 trophies for fans would have been probably a little too much. So we'll get the voting panel to whittle that down to about 8 or 9, and then the fans will decide. And you will both see when you get your ballots. It's the only one that doesn't really have a description of what you should be looking for. It's, hey, what do you think is the best trophy? And it can be anything you want. It could be the surfboard down south, or it could be somewhere in South Dakota where they have 2 shotguns as a trophy. Can be that as well. So, but that'll definitely be a fun category.
Just a MAGA hat. It's just one of the trophies.
Hey.
Okay, I'm very conscious of not taking up too much of your time and possibly your busy day of the year, Eric. So I have a few more. We'll try and do a quick fire, you and me, Dara. Best journalist. I have a few down here. I have Paul Seaton, John Pill, who I think is the maybe breakout best journalist in poker, if that's the category that can be created. And then just any of the people from Poker Fuse, because I really have a huge amount of time for data journalists and they do it so professionally. They're the team, obviously Nick and Sam and Anuj, and I just think they're brilliant. So I would put them in the mix. Dara, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with all those, and particularly Paul. I think Paul just does amazing work year in, year out. Paul was one of my 14 bluff Europe editors that they never seemed to last very long in that job. He was by far the one that I enjoyed working the most with. It is great to see him still pumping out great content. So okay, Paul for me.
Yeah, Paul does great work these days for Gamble Online. Obviously, he has in the past, or I think he still probably writes a little bit for Poker News, a little bit for Card Player Lifestyle. He freelances around a bit, but I think that's his steady gig after the Calvin Ayre gig previously. Best written content. I've written down Endgame Poker Strategy here. I didn't read it, but someone told me it was quite good. Dara, your thoughts?
I think Endgame Poker Strategy by Barry Carter is definitely the best book of the year. Barry's a wonderful guy as well, and
Barry deserves it.
Barry is really depressed about the fact he's never been given a GPI award.
Right.
I was going to give him an honorable mention in the industry section because he sort of just does so much. He puts out these great strategy books completely on his own, I have to say. And he's written The Mental Game of Poker. He's written this one. He's written a book on poker satellites. He's written a book on PKO poker strategy. And he turns out so many strategy articles a year. And then his Twitter also is just really good. Like Barry's hilarious. I'm surprised Barry doesn't get more love for his comedy. I think Barry's real talent is comedy. But it is a very dry wit, and he doesn't put in emojis into his tweets. So a lot of people just don't realize it's funny. But yeah, I would like to see Barry get an award this year for Endgame Poker Strategy, which is entirely his own work.
And is also hilarious in its own way.
Yeah, well, one of the better reviews for that was actually that I didn't expect this book to be quite such a page turner. I thought it was going to be really boring and full of charts because it's about ICM, but actually it's so well written. And again, that's all Barry. Barry's just put his own personality into it. And
it's all those sex scenes you put into it as well, Dara. That really made it a page turner for me.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, you haven't read it.
Moving on. Best video content. Well, until a couple of weeks ago, I would have actually said the Triton Million coverage. I thought that was superbly done. some Greg Goes All In videos are obviously in the mix there. As you said, Dara, he manages to have a crossover appeal. Sometimes they're like a minute long, but you watch them like 10 times because they're so funny and you watch them again and again. But I actually have to say, having watched your episode, I hadn't watched any of the other episodes until then, but having watched your episode, which I guess technically came out in 2021, but most of the document, 3/4 of the documentary came out in 2020. In 2022, 3/4 of it came out in 2021, maybe making it eligible, would be the Finnish documentary that you are a part of now, Dara.
It's on the list, yes.
Yeah, I thought that was incredible. I was optimistic because obviously having spoke to the guys, they seem very clued in, and just to explain, like my section was literally recorded on no sleep at the end of the IPO, so I was extremely worried it was going to come across really, really badly. They did an amazing edit job to make me sound vaguely coherent, but the whole series is really, really good. It has a very good narrative arc to it, where they start with the Finnish poker community. They interview Jens Kuhlen, and then they move to Monaco, to the most famous person who's come from Finland in poker terms, Patrick Antonius. And he had two very interesting episodes, and then they moved on to Dublin, where Uniki, or however you say it, that Finnish rapper's name, played, and they obviously interviewed me. But the thing was really put together well, and very, very well, for want of a better word, scripted. I know Mika Antonin put a lot of thought into that, and it's not aimed at sort of like the dyed-in-the-wool poker fan. It's aimed at a more mainstream audience, and that's something we don't see enough of in poker. I think a lot of what we see as content and is judged as good content is stuff which really only appeals to people who are already in poker. I think that's very, very useful.
Yeah, I think it's so massively important to, I guess, and this may be turning back to you for this question, Eric, just ways in which we can grow the game. Clearly, the award ceremony themselves is a sort of an attempt to shine a spotlight on the various different content creators and industry people who, contribute so much. You have player awards in there, as you should, but really it's sort of not a night for the players. The nights for the players are the nights when the players win all their money in the tournaments all the way through the year and whatnot. And this is really for the people who sort of put in the graft and the hard work, and shining a spotlight on the work they do, with the hope that it sort of gets a bit more attention on the game itself.
Definitely. I mean, one thing we did 2-3 award shows ago now, I forget, but media content used to be one category. Now it's 3. That's important, because we would see videographers, although they would get a little more credit, but photographers would not. Photographers would not be included in most of what we did. So, that was important to us too. There's so many talented photographers. I think we have 14 or 15 pictures that have been submitted to the list this year. That's quite impressive, given that there weren't a ton of events happening around worldwide. So, that's an important part. So those photographers would not be, other than the Joe Hirons and the Neil Channings, not the Neil Channings and Neil Stoddard, sorry, the big names, photographers, all the rising stars there as well. So I'm glad that you mentioned that Finnish documentary. That's another great entry that we have on the list that we're excited to see. It's new, it's fresh blood, it's people that are getting into industry, or were doing poker before but are doing poker, in a different way now. That's important to us as well. So we hope that the awards do give some exposure to people that absolutely deserve it.
Absolutely. And finally, although there are lots of other awards, I think you've mentioned a few of the ones that are not on my list, but I did just scribble down a few that we could just have a little bit of banter over, is Best Live Tournament Reporter. Now, Dara, I know you and I are going to be in complete agreement on this. In fact, I think there's going to be a sort of riot at the Poker Go studios if this person doesn't win, because we feel it's overdue at this point.
Yeah, this is one of those awards which kind of seems like a no-brainer. I was thinking about this. What was the name of that girl at the World Series you didn't even know she was interviewing? Anyway, not her. It has to be Kristen Setch every year.
She sometimes mixed up the Baldy lads, I think. Was that what happened?
Yeah, no, it's up to Christian is just the perfect guy. Like he's the other polar opposite. Like, I think a mistake a lot of live reporters make when they get into live reporting is they sort of focus on the big names that they know, and they maybe fanboy them, fangirl them, whatever. Christian just knows everybody. Like everybody, even who was famous within poker, will tell you that Christian knew about them before they were famous. And he just churns the content out. And in terms of accuracy, it's always so amazing as well. And one of the bugbears of players is how often hands get misreported. And, you know, a hand which is misreported badly can actually affect your career, essentially. People will form an impression of you as a bad player, and then you'll go, well, I didn't actually play like that. The stack to pot ratio was actually only 1. So obviously I went all in with my second pair on the flop. Christian just, yeah, he knows all the players. He knows poker. He writes very well. He focuses on what's important. And he's an absolute workhorse, which, you know, I kind of laugh about that because we got him to do the German translation of our satellite book. And I thought, okay, well, this will be done in a week. No, he's the slowest translator in the history of translators. Carlos, who did the Spanish version, translated all 3 books faster than Christian did 1 chapter. Giada, who did the Italian version, Simon, they were all way faster. He took like 18 months. He took longer than we took to write the book, to translate it.
So best and fastest live tournament reporter, slowest book translator. So that could be a category on its own for next year.
Another category, yes, of course.
Now, we love Christian. And actually, Christian falls into, I suppose, what's going to be my last question for you before we let you go, Eric, which is, I suppose, getting the balance right across the world. Now, it's funny, when I think of like getting the balance right, I kind of mean a lot of the time very prejudicially more Europeans, because the Americans sort of get to swarm it a bit. But of course, that's Canadians, that's Europeans, but actually the rest of the world sort of almost gets no look in. Yeah,
absolutely. That's my goal. And it's funny because we had that discussion the last time we talked about awards, which was 2 years ago. Sadly, this year is a little bit of a challenge because most of the poker was US heavy. That said, our POI is from Bosnia. Our mid-major player of the year is from Azerbaijan. Nadia Magnus wasn't born in the States. So we did have a lot of non-Americans performing. So my goal is always, and we've talked about this before, David, is to not only expose Europe, South America. I always say the BSOP gets the shaft every single award ceremony we do. They do these events that have thousands of people, and they seem to get, they get forgotten. In Asia, there's so much stuff that's happening. If you spend an hour seeing what's going on in Korea, that's our next big focus, is the Korean market. We get probably more results from Korea than any other country other than the States in the world daily. We usually have one person doing Korean results, only Korean results, every day. And it's complicated, right? It's different. There are names that repeat, and there are names that we're not familiar with. So the work that's being done and the work from the people in Korea is quite remarkable. Japan, the same. Japan, the next, that could be the home of the next poker boom if everything is opened up and they agree to do to do live gambling. Then we could have a poker boom in Japan. And so it's not just about. I always say, to me, I think it's too US and European focused. I understand your point saying that it's not enough about Europe, but I really want it to be global. One thing you'll see from us is that we'll be reaching out to global personalities. The Poker Personality Trophy, it's a popularity vote. So why not reach out to these big platforms in Brazil, in Argentina, in France, in Japan? There is a person on YouTube in Japan that has more subscribers than Brad Owen does. And that's not seen, but he gets millions of people to watch his videos. That man should get his people to vote for him to get nominated for the Poker Personality Award. And I think that's where that category is going to be really, really important to us. If we can have a mission accomplished there, we can get these people, to have an international flair to that category, I think we will have won. And I think that's going to, give more exposure to the awards, more exposure to the company, which is also always important. I'm never shy to say that. It's important that the GPI, which is, known very much in Asia, but Hennemob isn't. And in Europe, where it's more Hennemob and not as much GPI, so it's just the education throughout. So, it's a win-win-win. And we're excited. That's one category that I'm hopeful that is going to be a global category. And if people from the US want to be nominated, well, it'll be their job to get their people to vote for them. So, just to create competition that way, it's always fun to see, some of these Poker Personality Awards, if you don't share, hey, vote for me, you end up with, someone with 10 votes. And you're like, that makes no sense. This person gets 100,000 views on Twitter, and then they only get 10 votes. So that's one category I'm hopeful for. And I am hopeful that one day these awards will be 1,000%, well, I'm kidding, 100% global, every single category. My goal would be to have, a mixture of, of people from every end of the world in each category. We actually thought about doing that, about the final four should be one person from Asia, one person from South America, but that's forcing it. It's forcing it, and it's unfair. If there are 3 Americans that deserve to be on the ballot, well, then the 3 Americans need to be recognized. It's unfair to punish them. So, as you know, that the awards are one of my passion projects, and it does disappoint me when I see 90% of the ballot being American. But there's also things to celebrate. 2 award shows ago, we had, I believe, 4 women win trophies. This year, out of the 350 people that are getting ballots, I think it's 100 and some women are getting ballots. Like, that's things to celebrate. So, and hopefully that poker personality ends up being 4 people from 4 ends of the world, and I can be very proud to say that mission accomplished with that one, and hopefully that'll bring even more eyes to those people and more eyes to the awards. So, long story short, I agree with you. There needs to be change in that. I think it's cultural. I think that for all of us, even if we're not American, America dominates the poker world. Over 50% of the traffic on the Hen Mob is still American, so everyone is still programmed that way. So that in our brain, in our minds, sometimes we do forget about that one, that one success story in Brazil, one success story in Argentina, and that's important to bring those to the limelight as well. Again, this year will be difficult for that, but it is my mission in life that one year we all 3 of us sit down and are proud to say that the awards are a 30% American and then 70% rest of the world mix, not just Europe, not just Canada, but some of the great nations that love poker as well.
Really well said, Eric. And on that note, a final reminder to you all out there that the GPI Global Poker Awards ceremony will be available to watch on Poker Go on Friday, February 14th, almost live. I think they put like maybe a 10-second delay in case somebody does something horrific. That is it for another episode of The Lock-In. It remains for me to thank Dara O'Carney.
Thank you, David. Happy New Year to you and all of our viewers/listeners.
Absolutely. And of course, our special guest, Eric Danis. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen.